Hello everybody, welcome to Paris, welcome to episode number 43 of my series of live guided tours through the city. If you're not in Paris right now but you wish you were, you're in the right spot. My name's Frye, full-time tour guide, photographer, Paris content maker, also known as a French fry in Paris. As I stall a little bit to wait for my live viewers, I guess you're watching on the replay if you can hear my voice, thank you very much, I appreciate it. This is the 9th Arrondissement, as the title implies. This one's called The Artists of the 9th Arrondissement. It's a very soggy day today, as I see the names coming in. Hi Debbie, hi Charlotte. Wow, my wife is the second name I see arriving here. Thank you, loyal wife. It's great to have you here. 9th Arrondissement, the artists of this area. This is, of course, we're looking at this beautiful carousel. I'm actually on the Rue des Martyrs, which is a favorite foodie street. Some of you may have heard of it. The Rue des Martyrs. We could do a whole other episode on the Rue des Martyrs, and we will one day. I just grabbed a coffee just behind that little kiosk there in the center of the frame at KB Café Chats. KB is fantastic just there on the corner. So grab coffee there for sure if you're in this area. KB as in the initials KB. So the 9th Arrondissement, this is an area that has a couple of nicknames. We are just south of Pigalle, at the base of the hill of Montmartre. And because it's south of Pigalle, the very hip name for it nowadays, although I don't know how many people use it, is Sopi, S-O-P-I, which at least in English would mean south of Pigalle. So I don't know if that's just New York hipsters coming from Brooklyn and, you know, they want to create their own kind of Soho atmosphere, but it's called Sopi occasionally, not all the time, S-O-P-I. But it's more historically known as an area called Nouvelle Athènes, La Nouvelle Athènes, meaning the New Athens. Ancient Greece, of course, is when Athens thrived. And in the 19th century, this area became nicknamed that, the new version of ancient Greece. And the reason is because of the architecture around here. So we're going to get started. An incredible concentration of art history around here. I've got the umbrella. Let me show you. You might hear the pitter-patter of some raindrops today. We've got a very wet and blustery day today. Almost had to call it off earlier because the weather was so nasty. People coming in from Chicago and Colorado, thank you to all my live viewers. We're on a street called Rue Victor Mercier in the 9th Arrondissement. We're just south of Montmartre here. We think of Montmartre as being the hub artistically of creative genius and artists, but a lot of them worked and lived here in this area. So let's get started. Let me show you actually right here. I got to maneuver not only the usual bits of equipment, but the umbrella as well. Here at number 9, we've got, let me show you this. Start off with some nice architecture. It seems the building is condemned, actually. It's not in great shape. But it's from 1840. And you can zoom in just a little bit here. I got the wide-angle lens strapped on again today. And look at these details here. I don't know what will become of this building because, as I said, it seems to be closed up. But this idea of this area being called the New Athens, La Nouvelle Athènes, with a little bit of that Greco-Roman vibe. This is just beautiful. Again, 1840, this was also really a period of architectural revival. The mid-1800s saw a revival of Gothic architecture from the medieval period and also Greco-Roman. And you can see the building here is in rough shape. It looks like there were previous details here that were sculpted and just were too worn away and they weren't salvageable, so they just covered it up with that. And I imagine maybe restorers or whatnot, or the new owner of this building, maybe chipping away to see what was underneath. Let me back up and show you some more details. Look at those beautiful cherub dudes up there. You can see there's a bit of a blend of old architecture and new. If we go even higher there underneath the top balcony, you'll see some more. So the architecture here is really worth it. We're on a street that is really just another side street in Paris, and you might not even give it a second thought, but you're going to see there's a lot going on here. Hopefully that will get restored. There's a hotel here with a little awning. Oh la la. The wind. I might get carried away Mary Poppins style here in a minute. Look at that. I've photographed this a couple of times. Beautiful hotel, or at least the awning itself is great. And on a rainy day like this, we don't complain about the rain, we just consider it to be, a little more cinematic and romantic. So let's get into the art history here. An amazing concentration of it. Number 13, the previous building that used to sit here was a longtime residence of Mr. Degas, Edgar Degas. Degas was born of an American mom, a Creole mom from New Orleans. And she was living pretty well off of her family's cotton plantation money in the South. So Degas grew up in a relatively wealthy family. He was living actually off of the Tuileries Gardens and Place de la Concorde in his early 20s. And so he left his parents because essentially he told them, I don't want to study law anymore, I want to become a painter. And he had a falling out with his dad. So he bailed on the home near the Tuileries Gardens and he went to Italy, fled to Italy for 3 years, studied all the masters, the Renaissance masters, came back and didn't want to move back in with his parents. So here at number 13 of Victor Massé, Degas moved in and spent many, many years here, in fact. Now, during that period when he's living here at this address, he's going to the Louvre every day, and he is making a copy of a Velázquez painting, which artists still do today. They go there day after day and they make copies. And he noticed that every day he sat down to copy it, there was another artist next to him that he didn't recognize who was copying the same Velázquez picture. Turns out it was Edouard Manet, one of the great founding fathers of Impressionism, and the two struck up a friendship, and they were very, very, very close for a long, long time. So imagine that, Degas and Manet meeting at the Louvre every day and having a conversation and deciding that they had similar interests and essentially starting Impressionism together. Manet gets credit really with starting Impressionism, even though he didn't necessarily identify as an Impressionist, Manet. So I told you I had photographed this, right? And way back. And what I didn't realize that day is this is the former address of the old Chat Noir. Now this is stunning. If you're a fan of the old cabaret history, the Belle Époque, the bohemian atmosphere, this building right here, it's number 12, used to have a building that housed the famous cabaret Le Chat Noir. I'm sure many of you, if you've been through Paris, if you're fans of it, you've seen the old poster with the black cat. And in fact, let me zoom in here. It's a busy street. It's actually tough to cross today. Taxi, there you go. A street artist put, very fittingly, a black cat. And that's what this plaque reminds us of. So Le Chat Noir, the one and only, had 3 addresses in this area, south of Pigalle, but this was the second and most famous address. And you can look at old photos, it was stunning. What they did, everybody was here. This was literally considered the very first modern cabaret in 1881, it began. Poets, art critics, painters, actors, comedians. And up there on the second floor, you see, you got the ground floor and the next floor up, where they did their famous shadow plays. They had a theater where they'd project shadows onto a screen, and people loved them. They had these elaborate cutouts, first made of cardboard and then made of zinc. And you can go to the Montmartre Museum up the hill a little bit further and see some of those original zinc cutouts that they used to make those famous Chat Noir shadow plays. Now, why is it called the Chat Noir? Why was it back in its heyday? It's because during construction of the first one, a few streets over, the owner of the cabaret saw a black cat at the construction site. And look at this beauty. I think you're going to like the story of this one, number 25, on Rue Victor Massé. If you can catch a glimpse of the architecture here. It's 1886 and Vincent van Gogh's living in Belgium. He famously sold, they say, 1 painting in his lifetime. So Van Gogh was always desperately poor and he couldn't afford to live in Belgium, couldn't pay his rent. So he contacts his brother Theo, who was living here at the time. Theo's living in a tiny, tiny, tiny little apartment here in 1886. And in their correspondence between the two brothers, Theo tells Vincent, listen, it's way too small in here. Even though I'm single and I'm living alone, there's no room at all for you to live or work here. So wait until June 1st of this year when my lease is up and you'll come and we'll find another place that's bigger. But Vincent was desperate. He was sick. He just couldn't wait. So he showed up unannounced and moved into this building with Theo in 1886 and would spend the next 2 years living and working in Montmartre and drawing enormous inspiration from the Impressionists that he met. Let's just get a little bit closer here. So Van Gogh's door when he moved to Paris. So it was in fact too small, as Theo had told his brother, and so they couldn't stay here long. And when that June 1st lease was up, they did move to another street called Rue Le Pic. And many of you who have gone through, even in my tours, I show you the address on Rue Le Pic where these brothers lived, but this is where Van Gogh started. Van Gogh literally met at that time, he was an unknown, but he was able to rub shoulders back then with Renoir and Degas and Monet and Manet and Pissarro and Sisley and Gauguin. You just can't imagine it just changed his world. He actually attended the 8th Impressionist exhibit in Paris and was blown away, but he was never accepted as a true Impressionist. We tend to call him a post-Impressionist. And then look at this. This is the neighboring building where Van Gogh and Theo would have lived. And this is stunning. I hope you can make that out. Let me try to drop the umbrella, give the old lens a wipe down. Excuse me. A bit better. So remember that the idea of this area called La Nouvelle Athènes, the new Athens, in reference to ancient Greece, bleeding through into the architecture of the 19th century. This is a building from 1880. And let me, hold on, grab the umbrella here. When I was researching the tour for you all, I was thinking, what am I going to say interesting about this building? It's pretty to look at, but I thought, why don't we look at the real estate prices? Because I know a lot of you, when I give tours in Paris, you're always asking me what it costs. So let's say you wanted to live in this beauty. The average, I looked online, the average space or size of an apartment is about 40 square meters. If you're not a metric person, that's around 400 square feet. So put that in your mind, 400 square feet, 40 square meters. It's going to cost you €500,000 to buy a place here. And let me tell you, we're raising our 2 girls in a little under 80 square meters. And if we split that in half, that would be nearly impossible. So you do have to have a little bit of cash in the bank. I mean, if you do have a $500,000 kicking around, I guess for Americans it'd be more like 600 grand. Why not, right? I mean, of course, you'd love to live in this building and be the quote-unquote spiritual neighbor of Vincent van Gogh, but what a stunning view that is. Look at that, we're just watching the clouds blow by. Christina Consolet says it's the dream, absolutely. Before I forget, there is a longtime viewer and a supporter of mine on Patreon named Robin Taylor, and it's her birthday today. Usually I don't do tours on Saturdays, usually it's Sunday, on Sundays, usually it's Saturday. But today was an exception, and Robin Taylor said, oh, well, it just so happens it's my birthday. So happy birthday to you, Robin Taylor, one of the Frites, as we call ourselves, one of my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much, and have a great, great birthday. I hope this adds to it a little bit. So clearly we're in full art history mode. This place here is called Avenue Frochot. If you see, it's a gated community with a bit of construction on the left, but we'll block that out. Look at this beautiful, beautiful alleyway. It's very hard to get back there. If you see not the first building behind the trees, let me try to scroll up. Not the first building behind the trees, but the second one is where Toulouse-Lautrec lived. So we've already talked about Van Gogh and Manet and Degas. Toulouse-Lautrec lived right there to the left of the frame in the late 1800s. Toulouse-Lautrec, you may know, he was a short gentleman. He was born into a family that was a noble family. They were, in fact, descendants of the Dukes of Toulouse, or the Counts of Toulouse, rather. Now, if you're born into a noble family, one of the problems with that is that there's been a lot of generations of inbreeding. And sadly, his parents were first cousins, and that led to some genetic defects, including his bone problem. He had sort of a rare, bizarre form of osteoporosis, so he had very fragile bones, and he broke both of his legs at 2 separate accidents when he was a child. So he broke 2 separate legs. They didn't grow back properly, so he had sort of a man's torso on top of a children's legs, really. And he, maybe for that reason, he was never fully accepted into his noble family, perhaps. He really preferred the seedier, behind closed doors nightlife of Paris, and really thrived and did some of those beautiful posters for the Moulin Rouge and the other cabarets of the area. But this is charming, isn't it? Now, for my Patreon supporters, if you're new to this idea, long story short, I've got supporters of this project to help me keep going here, and they get special rewards and special content. Well, for your Patreon supporters, keep an eye out, because later on tonight, I am going to show you what's back here, because I actually got some access. You know me, I snuck my way in the other day, and I took a bunch of photos of Toulouse-Lautrec's home that we can see there in the distance, and at the back, also the studio of Toulouse-Lautrec. So I'm going to show you where that was located, a beautiful little gated community here. It's like a village in there. Also, what you'll see photos of if you're a Patreon supporter, around the left at number 6 was the home of Django Reinhardt. Do you know who he is? He was the amazing jazz guitarist, what they call gypsy jazz. He was Romanian and French born, and he lived here around the corner. So you've got Toulouse-Lautrec, not only a home and a studio, but you've got Django Reinhardt. I'm going to show you Django's, where he would play, actually. He was an extraordinary character, and we'll talk more about him. He just adds to the spice of this beautiful cocktail of an artistic neighborhood. So that's called Avenue Frochot. If you are a Patreon supporter of $10 or more, you'll get a map of this entire walk with all of these little details. So you don't have to remember this, you don't have to write it down. You can just print out the PDF and come here and explore and contemplate these areas on your own. Peggy Michik, how you doing? She says, you always provide so much great info. Thanks so much. Back to Toulouse-Lautrec as we walk around here. And let me show you one last view of this beautiful building, this very expensive building on the corner. Toulouse-Lautrec, very good friend of Oscar Wilde, and actually spent the night before Oscar Wilde's trial with him himself. When Oscar Wilde was put on trial for gross indecency, the very night before, Toulouse-Lautrec was with him. And also, Toulouse-Lautrec, while I was here, invented a cocktail. It's called tremblement de terre, which is French for an earthquake. And it was a mixture of absinthe and cognac. So I don't know if you should try that at home, but mixing absinthe and cognac was one of his favorite drinks. And in fact, he invented the cocktail. Just wanted to show you that cool little cafe there, by the way. Cute little spot. Onward. Along Rue Victor Massé, 9th Arrondissement, if you're just joining me. This is the artists of the 9th Arrondissement. And we have literally walked a block, people. That's how exciting this area is. There are never any tourists here, nobody walking around with guidebooks, but within one block, we've already come across this extraordinary history. I don't have any story for this place. I just wanted to show it to you because it's a nice visual. Sometimes stuff's just pretty. That's all. Okay, let me back up here. This is number 37. And there was a previous building here where a guy called Thomas Couture had a private studio in the mid-1800s. Couture, if you remember my episode back when we did the Church of Saint-Eustache in the area of Les Halles, in the axial chapel, in the rear chapel, there were beautiful frescoes painted by Mr. Couture. And this is where his studio was located in the previous building. I also mentioned, if you recall in that previous episode, that he was a teacher and tutor of Manet. The same Manet that was painting copies of Velasquez's paintings with Degas at the Louvre. And so this was where Manet learned how to paint. At least he was tutored by Mr. Couture. And then later Degas had a studio in the previous building here and also lived here. So again, the whole Manet-Degas. And while we're on the subject of those two gentlemen, I mentioned that they were very good friends, Manet and Degas. Well, there's a fun anecdote that I want to share with you. Degas once painted a picture of Manet sitting on a sofa with his wife at the piano. And it was a beautiful portrait of the two of them, this loving married couple. And Degas gives it to the Manet family. Well, he's visiting one day, and to his shock, to his dismay, he finds that a third of the painting had been sliced off the right-hand side, exactly where the wife of Manet was represented. She was gone. She was cut out of the painting. And Degas says, what the hell happened to my painting? Apparently Manet got into a fight with his wife and either got angry at her or angry at Degas himself and went over and just sliced to remove his wife from the picture. So Degas demanded that he take the painting back. He wasn't going to leave it there anymore, and he vowed to redo it and to put the wife back into the picture, but in fact never got around to it. So there's a little anecdote to chew on as we make our way further here. Hi, Elizabeth Diamond. It's great to see your name pop up. I love recognizing all these names of all these lovely Paris lovers. Well, I'm not implying you're all lovers as a group. Don't get me wrong. I don't think we've taken it that far. But you're all lovers of Paris. On the corner here, there was a place called Le Bal Tabarin. Le Bal Tabarin was sort of a competitor of the Moulin Rouge, in fact. One of the owners of the Moulin Rouge, not this building, a previous building, was running it. And it was just instant success from day one. This is, again, late 1800s. cabaret was just banging here. When the Moulin Rouge, just around the block, was damaged by fire, the French can-can essentially moved here. It really became the sort of the temporary temple of the French can-can because, hey, the can-can was so good, if you can't do it at the Moulin Rouge, you do it down the street here at Le Bal Tabarin. This is where Django Reinhardt played and was wowing people with his guitar skills. And I'm going to show you in a minute, just down the street over there, where he owned a club. Oh, before I forget, there's so many great things to forget, unfortunately. Can you see that in the distance? We got the Sacré-Cœur. Nice and sort of, looks like a golden marshmallow in the distance there. Hopefully you can make that out. If, I always say this, but if the live stream is blurry or fuzzy at all, know that I'll be posting later on an HD version of it, so you'll be able to see all these details clear and crisp if the live stream doesn't do it for you. Look at this place. What a throwback. We're talking about the cabarets and just these streets that we're on. This is where all of the slew of cabarets were in the Belle Époque of Paris in the turn of the century. This one is actually a dance club now, but it has kept its original 19th century facade, and this really gives you an idea of, everything was very expressive. Chez Moon. You can see, let me show you the pink sign here, throwback sign. It says Club 54, Cabaret Féminin. Feminine cabaret, which I don't know exactly what that means. I guess it means you're not going to see guys stripping down on stage. I don't know, a feminine cabaret. But let me just show you the Chez Moon. It's a nightclub now that specializes in electronic music and house music. Get the hours. They open up at 11:30 p.m. and they close at 6 a.m. So I'm such a domesticated daddy nowadays. There's no way in heck you're going to find me here dancing at 3 a.m. But you will find me here during the day, admiring that facade. Chez Moon. Isn't that a great name for a restaurant here, Maison Lautrec? We haven't seen the last of Toulouse-Lautrec, by the way. He had some other addresses. He and Degas and Manet, they lived all around this area. Just some door admiration. Do you see what we mean with the whole Athens and ancient Greece vibe? I think that's a great nickname of this neighborhood. And this door we have something called a mascaron. This is something you'll see often in Europe where a sculpted head up above a door. But I find this to be interesting. It's not your usual Greco-Roman type of face. It's almost a little ethnic in a way. And it just struck me. I mean, I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these around town. This one just looks a little different. And I don't know, there may be a story behind that. Some blue sky. I'm so glad I can put away my umbrella, which I've been trying to do with one hand for the last 10 minutes or so. Okay, so let's pop up here. We just talked about on the corner there was a famous cabaret that was banging each night. And Django Reinhardt played there. Well, Django, let me tell you, as we approach his club that he owned, he was a specialist in what they call gypsy jazz. Now, nowadays, I think the word gypsy is a little bit politically incorrect, so I don't even know if you'd use that term anymore. But that is the technical historical term for the music he would play. And in the 30s and 40s, he was rocking it. Now, he was a gypsy. He was Romanian born, and he would travel around in caravans and whatnot. And he's a brilliant guitarist, right? And get this, he's sleeping with his wife in one of the wagons of the caravan. And he knocks over a candle while they're asleep, and it bursts into flames, and they barely get out with their lives. And in fact, Django had half of his body covered with severe burns, including two of his fingers. 2 fingers of his left hand. Look at this. Imagine you're a guitar player. By the way, that's his club, or at least used to be his jazz club. These 2 fingers completely burned and unusable to a guitar player. So this guy, it's so inspiring. Django had to relearn, but he almost died. He had to relearn how to play the guitar with 2 fingers. And he did it. They told him he wouldn't walk. A doctor wanted to amputate one of his legs after this accident. He said, no, I'm determined to walk. And he managed to with a cane. So he saved his legs, taught himself how to play the guitar with 2 fingers, and became world famous for it. So different sorts of things are happening there nowadays, as you can see. But this is the address where Django owned a club. It was his lifelong dream to actually own a place. Now, before we leave, I want to mention, he bought this place in 1943. That's in the throes of the Nazi occupation. There were Nazis all over here. They had cafes they'd hang out at and theaters, and they were, the cabarets and whatnot. Well, they would come here. And the problem is, as we walk away from this place, Hitler hated jazz, and he hated gypsies. So if you were a gypsy jazz musician, you would get sent away quicker than anything. But Django was so good that the Nazis would come to this location that we're leaving now, and they would be so blown away by his music and his artistry, with just his 2 fingers, by the way, that they decided we're not going to persecute this guy, we're not going to send him away. Not that the Nazis get any brownie points for that at all, but it's interesting to know that what saved him was he was just so darn good at his job and gave them such a good time at the club that it was actually what saved Django Reinhardt in the end. Some details there. Let's get come on, Corey, proper composition. Give the folks what they deserve. There we go. Yeah, so that Django Reinhardt story I love. You could go right after this tour and fire up some of his music on YouTube, and it'll transport you right back to the 40s, the swinging 40s of Paris. Okay, just 1 or 2 little things left before I switch to the private tour extension. Here at number 9, this is where Toulouse-Lautrec would spend his final days, right there on the 2nd floor up above the storefronts. Toulouse-Lautrec, again, we talked about he had some issues, health issues. He had syphilis. He was drinking too many of those earthquake cocktails, the absinthe and cognac combo, and so he had very frail health. And it's his mid-30s, and he's actually about to pass away in his mid-30s. What a shame. So his mom flies over, comes quickly into Paris rather, gets an apartment here, and takes care of Toulouse-Lautrec. Actually hired a caretaker. And he wouldn't last much longer than that, actually. This is the 1890s. And so Toulouse-Lautrec, and such a titan of this neighborhood of Nouvelle-Athènes. Again, this is a side street. We've only gone 2 blocks, a block and a half, and there's so much going on. Notre Dame Cathedral, I know you're all aware of it, familiar with it. It was restored in the 1800s by an architect who specialized in Gothic architecture. His name was Viollet-le-Duc, and he spent a good 20-some years restoring Notre Dame and saving the cathedral from ruin. And he built, after that whole thing, he built a building here. You might expect, if he was a specialist in Gothic cathedrals, that this would be a very ornate building. And it's not. Maybe he was going for a more subdued feel after he had wowed everybody with the cathedrals of Europe, of France. But let's zoom in a little bit, because you can see glimpses of the architect's expressions here. Viollet-le-Duc, the man who restored and essentially saved Notre Dame. And it's going to be backlit, but you can see way up top there. And let me show you this. You got to keep your head on a swivel, because you can just go around and around. There's a cute little house that has been spared here with a bit of a cottage vibe. It almost sticks out, right, cramped in between these 2 more modern buildings. Okay, we're going to finish up here as far as my public version of this tour. The idea, if you're new to this thing, is that I do a public version of the walk, and then I stop and switch over to the private channel, where my Patreon supporters, as a reward for their generosity, get an extension of the tour with extra details. This is a place called, let me throw in an eatery here. It's called Pink Mama. Pink Mama is very, very hip, a bit expensive, but gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous from the outside and the inside. You can go ahead and Google interior shots of this place, and it is stunning. It's Italian food, and I know people don't flock to Paris to eat Italian food, but you won't be disappointed. This is kind of the place to be in this area. called Pink Mama. And I can't, you know, the lunch rush is over, so I am going to give you just a quick little peek without bothering too many people. You can see inside there. Oop. So keep that in mind. And then there's a beautiful building here that we're going to explore. We're going to talk about this with the Frites privately on Patreon. So there we have it, folks. This is episode number 43 in the can, the artists of the 9th Arrondissement. I hope you enjoyed it. Got a little bit of cabaret culture, some art history, some music history, and some nice visuals. Hope you appreciate it. Let me go ahead and say hello to you all. Let's switch this around. There I am, like that. Cut my hair, by the way, for those of you who are waiting for such things. I know my wife was waiting for it. So episode number 43 is finished. Patreon supporters, move over to the private Café Chat Facebook group, and in about 2-3 minutes, I'm going to give you an extension here. What I'm going to show you, pretty fun, I'm going to show you where the great opera Carmen was written by Bizet. What is you know, Carmen, it's one of the most famous operas ever. I'm going to show you where it was written by Mr. Bizet. I'm going to show you Meryl Streep's neighborhood and a shop that she loves to visit when she stays here. She's got an apartment nearby. And I'm going to show you a restaurant where Edith Piaf used to dine all the time with her lover. And so thanks, that's for privately for my Patreon folks. If you want to follow me, all the links you need, including Patreon membership and my Instagram and my photos. If you want to take a tour with me in Paris, go ahead and check out the links in the description. You can do that. And that's about it. Again, one last birthday wish to Robin Taylor. Have a great day. And that's about it, folks. Take care. And remember, if you can't bring yourself to Paris, I'm going to keep bringing it to you every weekend with a guided tour in real time. Take care. Have a lovely, lovely rest of your Sunday, if you're in fact watching on Sunday. And Patreon supporters, we're going to switch it over to the private extension and the Café Chat. Take care. Bye, everybody.